Hi and welcome back. We're talking about increasing your bird knowledge because having a good understanding of some of the habits of birds generally and of particular birds will help you find them and identify them. And one really good habit to help identify birds is their food preferences. There's a bewildering array of different things that birds eat. Many birds eat only one thing, such as meat or fruit, and each specialist feeder has a different name. So avivorous birds eat other birds. Carnivorous birds eat meat, and frugivorous birds eat fruit. In this case, we've got a satin bowerbird. This is a female, and they pretty much feed exclusively on fruit. Granivorous birds eat seeds. Insectivorous birds eat insects. This is a red-capped robin. This is a male. And you can tell by the beaks or bills that they're totally different, and it shows that their food preferences are totally different. Omnivorous birds, even though they're not specialists, have that name because they eat a range of foods, and everything and anything often. Piscivorous birds eat fish, such as cormorants and that sort of thing. Pollinivorous birds eat pollen almost exclusively. This is a New Holland honeyeater, and it has a comby structure on its tongue which helps it collect pollen, while it's delving into the various flowers. That's pollinivorous. Ophiophagous birds eat snakes and pretty much nothing else. Mucivorous birds eat tree sap, and nectivorous birds eat nectar from flowers, such as most honeyeaters. And this pied oyster catcher here, which you can find pretty much on every ocean beach around Australia, is molluscivorous, which means it eats shellfish and snails and crabs and that sort of thing. And again, the bill types are totally different, which helps you identify these different birds and what they eat. Nest building is a characteristic of all birds, and the variety of nests is really wide, and they can range in size, location, the materials used, and longevity. Part of the process of building a nest is associated with finding a mate in many species, and the nest may be built fresh every season. Here's just a few nest types to consider. We've got a raft of vegetation, and swans and other water birds like this grebe will use that kind of nest. We've got a tree hollow. I think this is a babbler or something like that, using a tree hollow. So many birds use tree hollows as nesting places. So it's really important that we try and retain as many trees that have hollows to keep the bird populations up. What's next? A hole in the ground or in a bank, a sandy bank. This is a kingfisher. Grass or stick bowl, or a combination of grass and stick, spider webs and all sorts of other stuff. Baling twine and goodness knows what else can be used in these very common nests, which are used by lots of different birds. Another common nest is this mud nest, which is basically made of mud and chewed up dirt. Often on a tree branch just like this, stuck on there and dried, or it's sometimes on a fork to give it a bit more stability. This is a wood swallow, but a lot of the mud nesting builders are in the same sort of family or group of birds in Australia. They're very common. Generally, the nests are well hidden, but some, like large raptors, are very obvious. This is an osprey, I think, in England, but we do have them here. So finding a bird on a nest can give you some good clues as to what that bird is, even if you can't see all of the bird. Nests are great. In fact, you can get a whole guidebook about nests and eggs. Guild is a term used to describe birds that share habitat and or habitat preferences rather than strictly genetic relationships. So for instance, all water birds would be in one guild because that's their habitat, that's where they live. Another guild may be daytime or diurnal birds of prey, birds other than owls and that sort of thing. Ones that do their hunting and eating during the day would all be in a guild. Another guild could be the bark and foliage feeders or gleaners. So they'll go along pecking up and down a tree. Now, if you've got an understanding of the feeding habits of birds, it can make it easier to identify what you're seeing by eliminating the unlikely ones. So if you're seeing a bird pecking at the bark of a tree, moving along the branch or trunk, pecking with its bill, or even scratching with its claws, then you can probably rule out that it's a nectar feeder or a fruit eater. It's more likely to be one of these bark feeders, and it's probably insectivorous. Sexual dimorphism is a term used in birding, and it describes the fact that in many bird species, the male and the female adults have different plumage or feathers. More often than not, the female plumage is duller and not as spectacular as the male, but that's just birds. But what it means is that identifying the sexes can be easier because the birds look so different. But it can also mean that, say, a female bird may be misidentified for a different species. So it can be helpful, it can not be helpful sometimes. So we've got some superb blue wrens here. I think they might be splendid wrens actually, so fairy wrens. A couple of king parrots. You can probably tell the male and the female in all of these pairs. We have some, I think they're pale-headed rosellas, or they might be the yellow rosellas from Adelaide. This is the male, this is the female. It's only a slight difference. And in the field, it would be pretty difficult to pick it up unless you had a really good set of binoculars or they were really close. And this is the maned duck or the wood duck with some little ducklings. This is the male, this is the female. The male really only has this mane of feathers or a sort of thickness of feathers, and they're a lot darker as well. So that's sexual dimorphism, another good way of identifying birds. Thanks for listening.